Bibles, please, to Luke chapter 18. Luke 18, and we're going to look at a familiar text tonight. You know these verses. You'll recognize them. They are very powerful verses from the 18th chapter of Luke, beginning at verse 9. This is a parable that Jesus gave during his ministry. And just a few of my thoughts as by way of introduction was that, this was something that came up a lot in the Proverbs, is that our words really reveal what we believe about ourselves, and our words really reveal what we believe about God. Our words do matter, and what we say to one another, how we say it, our attitude towards one another, it says a lot about what we think about ourselves. And it also says a lot about what we think about God. I know a lot of people will spout off different things and they feel bad about it. Like they say things that's seemingly uncontrollable and they regret it later. And that happens from time to time. But it's also something that should be addressed when you have a pattern of life of saying things that you shouldn't say. The difference in what we're going to look at tonight and what I just kind of laid out to you is the person that speaks the words is proud of his words. In fact, that's really the problem, is pride. But Jesus used a parable here in verses 9 through 14 to illustrate what some people think about themselves and what they think about others. And it comes through in his parable. It's in the context of a prayer. But I want to say this at the beginning. This is very important for you to know. This parable is not really about prayer. This parable is about the condition of our heart. And it just so happens that it's said in the context of a prayer. But what we say, and you can go ahead and, we're filling in the blanks here. We're coloring in this picture. What we say in our prayers often does reveal what we believe about God. I hope it does. If not, it's just like idle talk and idle chatter and nonsense. But when we pray, and I'm not here to sound like this is really about prayer, because it's not. This is not a manual or a how to pray or how to not pray. That's not the point. The point is that what you say reveals what you believe about yourself, and what you say reveals what you believe about God. And Jesus uses a parable of two men praying to illustrate that very fact. And so that's the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter, and I'm not trying to be funny here, the heart of the matter is what's in your heart. And what is in your heart comes out right here in your mouth. So notice there in verse 9, he's describing two different people. The first thing I want you to see here is a parable for the self-righteous and bitter. I want to show you something about Luke. Just in general about Luke, especially in chapter 18. It's pretty interesting stuff. It says in verse 1, look at verse 1. Then he spoke a parable to them. Now look at verse 9. Also he spoke this parable. You see that? So you have two parables back to back, and they're both set in a context of prayer. But the first one, it's about that persistent prayer. He tells you, Luke tells you what Jesus' moral or point was at the beginning of the parable. You don't always have that. If you're familiar with reading parables in the Gospels, a lot of times it just says, and he gave a parable to them, and then it's up to the reader to figure out what the parable means. Luke he helps us out. Okay, and the inspiration of God, inspiration of the Holy Spirit through Luke as he writes this, we're given a key to interpretation of the parables at the beginning of the parable. For example, look at verse 1. He tells you what this parable, he tells you what's coming down the line. It says that men always ought to pray and not lose heart. That's the point. The point of the parable in verses 1 through 8 is keep praying and don't get discouraged. So you have a need. You have a need. God knows your need, and the point of that first parable is keep coming. Keep coming back to God. Just don't quit. Don't lose heart. Don't be discouraged. Because the reader, and I don't mean to get too far off track and start preaching about 1 through 8 right here, but we have to remember that when we have a need, God knows that, but also God has other things in the world to worry about besides our lone need. This is one person. So God will answer your prayer, but He's also working out other things around us, and your prayer may have to wait. Your request may not be at the top of the priorities. Because God is working things out as we're working together with others in our environment, our situations around us, our circumstances around us. We have a need, and God will meet that need, but it may not happen lickety-split. It may not happen like that. You know, we live in a world of, we just want instantaneous results. We want it now. How many have used a microwave oven today? No one. Okay. Well, I have. I've used a microwave. Okay, a few people did say yes. Okay. I just want our audience to know they did raise their hand. Microwaves give us instant results. Nearly instant. I mean, you can virtually heat a meal up in a minute. In a minute. What used to take 30 minutes, 45 minutes, takes 1 minute. How many's been to a drive-thru today? No one. Okay, good. Good for you. Good for you. Now, don't lie in church. Now, if you come on. Not yet. You're about to, though. We love our drive-thrus. We love our microwaves. And we love our cars. We love our phones. We love our little gadgets. And we've got at the tips of our fingertips so much power. How many shopped on Amazon today? All of you did. I know you did. No, you go to Amazon and you go to app and you type it in and boom, you got 200 results. And what can I do today? Well, I can buy this and I can buy that. And guess what? You ain't even got to get up. You can buy it on your phone and it comes to your doorstep. Now, if we ain't spoiled and overwhelmed with all kinds of conveniences, I don't know what is convenient, okay? But we are, and we have that. But the Bible teaches us that we should not be discouraged when our prayers are not immediately answered. Okay, I didn't even plan on bringing that out, but I'm trying to show you the structure here of chapter 18. He does the same thing in verse 9. In verse 9 it says, also he spoke this parable. It seems like that you have this running narrative here in Luke chapter 18, and Luke is laying this stuff out for us to show us this is who Jesus is. This is what He wants for you. He wants you to keep coming back to God. And He also, in verses 9 through 14, He wants the things that come out of our mouths to be right. Because the things that will come out of our mouths are an indication of our heart. If the thing coming out of your mouth ain't right, your heart ain't right. That's it. If it's coming out of your mouth, now you can lie and you can say good things and the heart may not be. So that's a general rule too, isn't it? Because there's some deceivers out there. There's some actors out there. We call them hypocrites. They are putting on a show. Well, we're going to see a little bit of a hypocrite, a little bit of a putting on a show here in the parable, actually. So you got a parable here for the self-righteous and the bitter. I know a lot of bitter people. And bitter people don't like other people. That's one of the main symptoms or characteristics of a bitter person is that they hate people. And notice what Luke says. Also, he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and they despised others. Okay? So that's why I say bitter, because they don't like other people. They don't like other people because probably, you've probably heard this before too, is sometimes we don't get, I've heard this in the context of like family members or friends. Sometimes people are too much alike that they can't get along. You ever heard that? Yeah. Because the fact of the matter is you see the bad characteristics in other people, but you can't see it in yourself. And when I see someone who is a lot like me, that might be a family member, that might be a friend, I can't stand them. I can't stand them. Because they remind me of the bad characteristics that I don't want to be like that. I don't want to do that. But deep down inside, you've got it too. We all have these little quirks and ways about us that we don't like, and we see it in other people and we can't stand them. Well, I also know a lot of other people that are really bitter towards people from other countries, of other religions, and they can't stand them. They hate them. In fact, they take it too far, and I don't see Jesus acting like that. In fact, I not at all. But here's they entrust in themselves that they were righteous, and that right there you should see a red flag. Because who are we supposed to trust in? Not ourselves. Not ourselves at all. I want to set the stage for this because I want to be so clear on this. I want to be clear on it every time I preach, but I want this to be clear to us. Is they are trusting in themselves rather than trusting in Jesus, that they were righteous, okay, and despised others. Now, so notice this. That's the targeted audience. That's who he's talking about. That's who he's talking to. And look what he says there in verse 9. They entrust in themselves, so they are confident in their own righteousness. The second thing there is they despised others. All right. So we're going to come back to that in just a minute, that whole idea, because that's what the whole thing is about. Now, notice the occasion. When did this, and this is not a joke, and I probably shouldn't have said that, but two men, y'all didn't get it. Okay, I knew I shouldn't have said it. Two men go into the temple, right? That's not a joke, right? Okay, anyway, I'll be quiet. Two men went up to the temple to pray. Some of you are getting it now. Okay. Whew. Two men went up to the temple to pray. So that's the occasion. They're praying at the temple. They're both doing it. Well, bravo. Good job. That's wonderful. One is a Pharisee and the other is a tax collector. Well, you have what we're going to see here is a comparison. We're going to lay side by side the Pharisee, who is over the top religious. Over the top religious. I mean, this person is going to wear the right clothes. He has to wear the right clothes. He has to. Jesus made a comment about that, about the phylacteries, about the hems of their garments are so decorated. They have tassels and hems. And on the hems of their sleeves, on the hems of their robes at the bottom would be all these intricate designs that would indicate a pious relationship with God. I am the perfect disciple. That's the way. They have to dress that way. They have to, or they don't. They're not right unless they put on the right clothes. And they're not right unless they comb their hair the right way. They have to do certain things or else they're not right. So that's a Pharisee. Over the top. They're going to eat the right things. They're going to do the right things on the right day, and they will never deviate. And I want you to know this. This is what I was going to say a while ago. Is don't confuse someone who is really trying to do right with a Pharisee. There's nothing wrong with doing right. There's nothing wrong with striving for purity. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's still striving for purity is not going to get you to heaven. That's not going to get... Striving for purity is the results of a changed heart. The problem is that if the heart's not changed, all of the striving and all of the working amounts to nothing. It's just things that you do. So the Pharisee is wrapped up in things that he does. Things that they make a big difference to him. And so the tax collector, I don't have to explain to you what a tax collector is, do I? This is a traitor. This is someone who is a Jew who is working for the Roman government and is making money off of a government that most Israelites, and especially Pharisees and Sadducees, would say, we need to be rid of the Roman government and rule ourselves. So you're working for the enemy. They're Jewish. They're of the same nationality. They've undoubtedly have a desire to worship God in the temple, but because of their career choice and who they've aligned themselves with, they are ostracized and cut off from society and branded a traitor. Matthew was one. Matthew was a tax collector. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. And there were other tax collectors mentioned in the New Testament. They were the scum of scum. Now they had money, but they're scum. They were just disliked and despised. So you have here a comparison of two men that couldn't be farther apart. Far, far apart in their status in society, how they are received by their own people. So it begs the question, what does God think about them? That's the question. What does God think about these two men? And you're about to find out. So number 2, here's the prayer of the self-righteous. The prayer of the self-righteous. Notice in verse 11. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself. Now, Jesus gives you a clue at how far his prayer will reach. Let me say it to you this way. I don't mean to get too far off. Your prayer will be heard by God, because God knows everything, but He may not listen to it. This prayer is not being listened to. Jesus tells you right off the bat that He prayed to Himself. This is almost like a soliloquy. In other words, a solo by Himself. He's talking to Himself, and His words are meaningless because they are wicked and vile. And I'm going to tell you what's wicked and vile about it. It's full of pride. Look at what He says. This is a terrible example of how not to pray, by the way. Because this person is self-righteous. This person is not basing their righteousness on what Jesus has done or what God might do. Remember, we're on the other side of the cross. The cross hasn't happened yet. So, but they still should have faith in God as opposed to full of pride and full of their own righteousness. He says, God, I thank you that I am not like other men. Hey, shut it down right there. Shut it down right there. And I'm going to tell you right now, here's a warning to all of us and myself included. If you think that way, you're thinking wrong. You're thinking wrong if that's the first thing that is on your mind and the first thing you think of is, God, I thank you I'm not like him, and pointing the finger sideways. That's a terrible, terrible mindset. And I want to tell you, it's a very prevalent mindset. I hear it all of the time. That's the epitome of self-righteousness when we begin to be thankful for not being as bad as someone else. I thank God that I'm not like them. Huh. Okay. You're thankful that you're so outstanding. That's what you're thankful for. So he's going to self-congratulate himself. He's going to applaud himself. He is absorbed with himself. He is, I don't know if you've ever heard this term. There's a term out there called a brag sheet. You know, sometimes an athlete will try to market themselves for a college recruiter. And they'll develop a brag sheet. And it'll have all their accomplishments on there. Rushed for 1,500 yards my junior year and scored 22 touchdowns. In my senior year, I rushed for 1,800 yards and I scored 36 touchdowns. I had 42 receptions for 850 yards. It's a brag sheet. It's one accomplishment after another. Miss Mandy probably knows from talking to Eric, that's what the athletes do. They have to promote themselves. It's a brag sheet. Here he is coming to pray, and he just brings his brag sheet forward. And he says, God, thankful I'm not like these other people. And then he begins to list all of those things he's not, and he's talking about other people in the process. Those extortioners, those that are unjust, those that are adulterers, or even this tax collector over here. In fact, I've got my eyes on him right now, and I'm so glad I'm not like that guy. He's here to brag about himself. And I'm telling you this, if that's how we think about other people, we got a heart problem. Let me make this clear to you, and I was about to say it a while ago and I backed off. When you look at this parable, this is not so much about salvation, and this word in a minute is going to come up, justified. I don't believe it's talking about forensic justification. I believe it's talking about our position towards God, our attitude towards God. So if your attitude, let's say you're lost. Okay, I'm going to give you two scenarios, one of a lost person and one of a believer. And either one can have this attitude. It doesn't mean you're lost. It doesn't mean you're saved. It's just an attitude. But I'm going to tell you this, if you approach God and you have this attitude, and then you say, I want to be saved. I'm not sure that God's hearing you. I'm not sure that you are in a position to present yourself a candidate for salvation. I'm not sure about that. I'm just telling you, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying you won't be. I'm not saying you're not saved. I'm just telling you this. I don't think that is the posture and approach that God is looking for based upon this parable in order to present yourself for salvation. So, that's the first scenario right there. Here's the second scenario. Let's say you were saved at a young age, 9, 10, 11 years old. And you didn't develop your bitterness at 9 or 10 or 11 years old, but you have since then. So now you're an old codger who's been saved for 50 years, right? And by the way, I'm an old codger too, so I'll throw myself in there, so don't get offended. Now you've been saved for 50 years, and you're bitter. And you hate people. And you self-congratulate yourself. You compare yourselves to others around you. Let me tell you what's happened is you have underdeveloped as a believer. Number one, you're not mature. You're not spiritually mature. You've somehow gotten the wrong idea about what it is to be a child of God. But you're still saved. You're still saved. But you don't have the right idea, and here, that's one of the purposes of this teaching, is so that we can check ourselves and say, you know what? I need to clean that up. I can clean that up. God can clean that up. I want to be right, and I don't want to have the wrong attitude about other people, hating people, and being self-absorbed and congratulate myself and bring my brag sheet to God and be full of pride all the time. Because the standard is not what other people are doing for your righteousness. That's not true righteousness. True righteousness is based upon the standard of what Christ did for us. That's the true standard. I'm going to say that again because the true standard of whether a person has righteousness is, do they have an attitude about themselves that is reflected in what Jesus did for them or what they did for God? It's almost like this Pharisee is saying, God, look at me. Aren't you glad to have me? Aren't you glad that I'm one of your people? Because hey, I got it going on. I'm not like these other people. Look at me, look at me, look at me. That's what he is saying. Now, in verse 12, I fast twice a week, I give tithes of all that I possess. Not only does he compare himself with other people, but he does exactly what I just said he does. He brags about what he does. This is what I've done for the Lord. And Lord, aren't you glad to have me? Lord, aren't you lucky that you got me as one of yours? Because look at what I can bring to the table. I guarantee you, that right there makes me sick. And I've heard other people try to convince someone to come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and join the church because of what they can offer the church. I'm telling you, you get that garbage out of your head, because it's not what you can offer a church or what you can offer the Lord, it's what the Lord will do for you. And if a church is where it needs to be, and a lot of them aren't, then a church will be blessing others, not what they will be blessing the church. We got to get it right. We got to remember who we're coming to and why we're here. We are here because we're coming before the Lord. We're not here coming before other people and competing with one another and trying to prove how good we are compared to other people. Because if that's what it turns into, hey, it's a whole bunch of monkey business. And I'm going to tell you, that's what it has come down to in a lot of churches. It's what can we offer each other? What can we offer God? No. You better back off and understand that God is in the superior position, and God is the one who is going to be blessing you. You're not blessing God with your presence. Oh, I do this and I do that and I can do this. Who cares? Who cares? God can do that. God can do it without you. God can do, if you look at from Genesis all the way to Revelation, God has always used the lowest, the foolish, the most bumbling idiots to accomplish His will. It's not even funny. Look at Jacob. Look at David. Look at Moses. Go on and on and on, and you'll see that God keeps using these people who are unlikely to be able to offer God anything. Moses said, I can't talk. I stutter. I can't even speak. God says, don't worry about that. I'll use your brother. I've got that worked out. People come up with all kinds of excuses when they're called, but God doesn't care about that, because God can do it on His own. But what He's looking for is a faithful response to His word. That's what He's looking for. He's not looking for what you can offer. He's looking at your faithfulness. He's looking at your heart. He's looking at how you respond to Him. So that's who God uses. God uses the lowly and He uses the weak, and He doesn't use the people full of pride. He doesn't use them. Now, look at this in verse 13. Here we go. So that's the prayer of the self-righteous. Here's the prayer of the unrighteous, and I use that word a little bit facetiously, unrighteous, because the tax collector is unrighteous in the eyes of mainstream Israel. 99% of people in Israel, maybe not 99, maybe 85, a super significant majority of people would say the tax collector is an unrighteous person. He's undeserving of fellowship with God. He should not come to the temple to worship. In fact, look at what it says in verse 13. He stood afar off. The tax collector, he stood afar off. He would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven, and he beat his breast. Three things there. And what he does in those three movements, those three actions that are described there, it's like a low self-worth. That's what he does. He stood away from others. He feels like he's unworthy to stand in the midst of God's people. He's unworthy. So he stands afar off. He's unwilling to look up. He's very aware of his sin. He's shameful about his sin. He would soon just look down at the ground instead of looking up because he is so shameful about his sin. And I'm going to tell you, it's good to be shameful about your sin. It's not healthy to feel like you're worthless, but it is healthy to be aware of your sin. The Pharisee is not aware of any sin. In fact, if you asked him, say, no, I don't have any sin. I'm a perfect man. I'm perfect in every way. Well, I mean, look at me. Look at my clothes. Look at my hair. Look at what I do. I fast twice a week, sir. I give 10% of everything that I give and everything that I take. If someone gave him a bushel of peaches, he would give 10% of those peaches. Everything that he possesses, 10%, 10%. He is not going to miss a lick when it comes to being on the spot. There is no sin in him. But this tax collector doesn't even want to lift his head up. He doesn't even want to look up. Beat his breast. That's a indication of sorrow about his sin. Well, notice there at the rest of 13 what it says. This is what he says. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. By the way, the word is not mercy. The word is atonement. The word, and that's interesting because, which atonement is an act of mercy. So we're not far off in that translation, but it's not eleos. That's the word for mercy. It's the word for atonement. And atonement means covering. And what he is asking is this: God, cover my sin. Cover my sin. I'm going to tell you, when you're reading this and when I'm reading this, when the modern day reader reads this, it's got Jesus' name all over it. Because what we know is the cross happened. Jesus died on the cross. That hadn't happened here yet. But we know after the fact, make atonement. Make atonement. You have an individual who is frustrated with his ability to feel good about himself because sin has just ripped his heart up into pieces. His heart is ripped into pieces. And so what he does is says, God, make atonement for my sin. I'm a sinner and I need covered. I need covered. Well, we know what Jesus is going to do. He is going to enable that. He is going to make that a possibility. His death on the cross will make this atonement a reality. up to this point, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of God confusion. I'll just say it like that. A lot of confusion about redemption, a lot of confusion about salvation, a lot of confusion about what do I do? Do I dress apart? Do I eat right? Do I go here at a certain time? Is that the key to righteousness? There's a lot of confusion about it. And Jesus answers the question of the confusion. Jesus is the one who makes atonement. You ever wondered why? This is what I want to ask the person back in that time. Sir, tax collector, Pharisee, have you ever wondered why you just don't feel right? Because you need Jesus to cover your sin. Well, notice here in verse 14, and this is the teaching of Jesus. This is the teaching of Jesus. This is what he says. I tell you. So the story is over. Now Jesus is going to he's going to teach right here in verse 14. He says, I tell you. It reminds me of the Sermon on the Mount when Jesus says, you have heard, but I say unto you. This is Jesus teaching. I tell you, this man, that's the tax collector, went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Well, you have two parts here. Part number one in verse 14 is Jesus said one of them is closer and in a better position than the other. The tax collector turns out, this is like a, whoa, Jesus, I can't believe you said that to them. To us, we're like, yeah, I'm bored with it. Are you about done? To them, it would be I can't believe you said that. This would be on CNN and Fox for like 2 days, if you said that back then. It'd be on the 24-hour news cycle. Coming across the bottom of your screen. Jesus said that tax collectors are more justified than Pharisees. What? Are you serious? You know why? Because he is in a better position. Because it's the way that he looks at himself as proper. He is a sinner. And he's not basing his righteousness on what he does. He's basing his righteousness on what God might do for him. I don't think it's saying here, I don't think that word justified, and I said it a while ago, is a forensic justification definition. In other words, I don't think he's saying the tax collector went down to his house saved after that prayer, and then the Pharisee is lost as a ball in high weeds. That's not Jesus' point. The point Jesus is making is this. This is the right heart attitude. This is the way you come to God. This is the way you would look at God. This is the way you would look at yourself. So a while ago when I said our words reveal what we believe about ourselves and what we believe about God, that's exactly what this parable shows, is this tax collector's words reveal something important for us in how we should view ourselves and how we should view God. No, so let's rehearse it one more time. I am ashamed of my sin. Anything wrong with that? Nope. Because you'll never repent unless, first of all, you are ashamed of your sin. So here we are, we're putting ourselves in a position to have a right relationship with God. That's what Jesus is talking about. On the other hand, the Pharisee brings his brag sheet to God and says, look at what I can offer you. God, are you ready for me? Here I am. I'm presenting myself as the ideal candidate to be a follower of you. And by the way, just like some people say, this church needs you, that Pharisee would say, and God, you need me, don't you? You need me. And I'm going to tell you, that's not the way it works. That's not at all the way it works. Because God doesn't accept that. God doesn't accept someone who's so full of themselves. And they're so full of themselves that they've let it affect their attitudes towards other people. Don't miss what it says there in verse 9. Not only were they believing in themselves for their own righteousness, but they despise other people. Jesus said, love your enemies. That's what he said. He said, love one another and love all people. When Jesus died on the cross, he was loving all people. And he gave everyone an opportunity. Doesn't mean everyone's going to take it. But he gave everyone an opportunity to open up their heart to him, lay down and lay bare and lay open and let Jesus come into their heart and let Jesus change their heart. That Pharisee ain't letting nobody in, y'all. He ain't letting nobody in. He's not in a good position to approach God. That's the first part of verse 14. Here's the second part of verse 14. And it's this. It's a principle. It's a divine, this is coming from God, y'all. This ain't coming from John Bagby. This ain't coming from who published this thing? I don't even know. It ain't coming from a publisher. This is not, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Or last Wednesday night, actually, in 1 Thessalonians. Remember, the church at Thessalonica received the Word of God not as it was the Word of men, but as it was the Word of God. The Word of God says this about humility. Are you ready? Everyone who exalts himself, puffs himself up with pride, will be humbled. So, I guess this is probably not a good thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, just for sake of trying to explain it. You're going to want to fly up here, you ain't going to fly up there very long because God's going to bring you down. It ain't going to happen. He who humbles himself. Now, there's a difference here. One is active and one is passive. You see this? In the passive, it's be humbled, which means that someone is going to act upon you to humble you. Now, I don't want to force, do you want to be forced to be humble? Because I'm going to tell you, if you're forced to be humble, that can't be a very enjoyable experience. And most likely, that's a painful experience, to be humbled. When you are wanting to be here, but God says, no, you're going to be down there. And I'm going to make sure of it. You're going to be down there. Does that feel good? No, that doesn't feel good. That's not going to feel good when God does that to you. That's what the language is saying. You will be humbled. In other words, God's going to humble you. And we can all go back to different times in our life, and we can probably tell you some stories about how God's humbled us at certain times in our life. But look at this. He who humbles himself, that's in more of an active. He who humbles himself, that means he voluntarily takes on humility in his heart and has more of a desire to be humble than he does to have a desire to be exalted. What is my goal? I want to be humble. I want to be humble. Why do you want to be humbled? Well, the right answer is because Jesus was humble. That's the right answer. A really good answer, or a very close good answer to that is this. I know who God is, and I know who I am. And I'm going to humble myself as I come in the presence of a mighty God. And you know what? Let's cut the, you know what? And let's do it right. So I'm going to humble myself. And I'm going to approach God in the way God is to be approached. Not with my brag sheet, but with humility. God, what will you do with me? God, how will you use me? God, I need your covering. I need your atonement. I need your mercy. I need justification. I need your mercy. I don't have any righteousness. I don't have any righteousness in myself. And God, cleanse my heart of this bitterness that I have towards other people. It's not right. It's not right. I want to humble myself. And when I look around and I see the extortioner, I see the adulterer, I see the thief, I see the murderer, I see all these people that have done, they're all around me. They're all around me. But guess what? God, you're a God of mercy, and I know you can reach their heart too. You know why? Because I'm just as bad. I got a little bit of all that in me too. Lying, thievery, think thoughts I shouldn't think, say things I shouldn't say, go to places I shouldn't go. I've made mistakes in my life. And God, I humble myself and I come to you and I throw myself at your feet. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this word. We ask you to